When I was a young boy, my family emigrated to the United States on the Grip Zone and settled in the Midwest and in California. In my 20s, I was a crew member on one of the Swedish American Line's cruise ships and stepped ashore here in the Lisbon harbor in 1968. 20 years ago, when I started collecting information about the Swedish American Line and the exchange voyages, I had no idea how big and unexplored this part of history was. This was in 1998. The internet was in its infancy, but in Swedish shipping magazines and books, the exchange voyages were mentioned from a shipping perspective, but very little about the passenger stories or the American point of view. About 15 years ago, a friend and I were asking ourselves, who were these people who had been exchanged for Americans in Europe and Asia? We settled for the explanation that it must have been diplomats and captured submarine crews. We knew almost nothing about the internment camps in the USA, and we couldn't imagine that internees from camps in the US could be on board the Swedish ships. It was only when passengers and crew started emailing me and writing in the guest book of my website that the width of the story evolved. These stories have been untold for so long, but they have not been forgotten.
I am here at the inlet to Lisbon, where the Grip Zone would have entered in 1944, carrying internees from the United States. Lisbon has of course changed since the 1940s. Over there, across the bay, is the magnificent statue of Christ, overlooking the city. And next to it is the 25th of April bridge, which used to be called the Salazar Bridge, but was renamed in 1974 to commemorate the Carnation Revolution.
Portugal was neutral during World War II, which is the main reason why Lisbon was selected as the destination for many of the exchange voyages.
As we all know, the Second World War started in 1939 when Germany attacked Poland. But the story of the exchange voyages starts a couple of years later, in 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and the United States and its allies declared war upon the Axis powers. In a short time, the US government and many other governments realized that many of its citizens had been in the wrong place at the wrong time and were in peril. Sometime later, hundreds of thousands of POWs and civilians had been placed in prison camps and internment camps all over the Far East and Europe. Members of the armed forces, diplomats, business people, missionaries, nuns and priests, as well as merchant marines who had been left behind, had to be brought home. How would it be possible to bring all these people home across the seas in wartime?
The Swedish American Line had two ocean liners laid up in Sweden, the Gripsholm and the Drottningholm. Before the war, these ships primarily made regular Atlantic crossings from Scandinavia to North America, but they also made cruises to many parts of the world, among them the Indian Ocean and South America. This experience would be very valuable for the exchange voyages. After negotiations with the German, Italian, and Japanese governments, an agreement was made to start exchange voyages using the Gripsholm and the Drottningholm. The Gripsholm was chartered by the US government and the Drottningholm by the US, British, and French governments. The agreement with the American government stated that when the exchange was made at the destination, an equal number of passengers from both sides should be exchanged. So, the US had to deport the same number of persons to Germany and Japan as the number of Americans being sent home. The American official personnel in Germany and their families had been assembled in Bad Nauheim near Frankfurt. The German embassy staff in America was gathered in the Greenbrier Hotel at White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. Later, the Japanese officials also came there. The Greenbrier Hotel was decades later, after the Cold War, to be revealed as the bunker site intended for housing the US Congress in case of a nuclear attack. The ships would sail fully illuminated, unarmed, without convoy, with the words Sverige and Diplomat painted on their sides. Actually, the Drottningholm was sighted by a German submarine on its second voyage to Lisbon from New York on the 3rd of June 1942. The German submarine U-701, on its way westward across the Atlantic, discovered and stalked the Drottningholm for half a day and moved very near the liner. Finally, the captain recognized the Swedish flag and could read the word diplomat on her side. The U-701 continued towards the American coast and was later sunk by a US Army attack bomber on July 7, 1942. But of course, the crews of the warships gave the Drottningholm and the Gripsholm free passage, because they knew that next time they themselves could be on board to be exchanged as prisoners of war. The Gripsholm made 2 long voyages carrying Japanese passengers. The first destination in 1942 was Lourenço Marques in Mozambique, which was a Portuguese colony at the time, and the second in 1943 was Mormugao in Portuguese India. In these ports, the Gripsholm would be met by a Japanese and an Italian vessel. These ships had picked up American POWs and internees from many ports in the Far East. The Gripsholm had bunkered fresh food along her way, and a buffet was served on deck. The Americans who embarked had spent months and years in internment or prison camps, and many knelt and prayed when they saw the abundance of food, while the Swedish crew wept. During the voyages back to the United States, the Gripsholm maintained her ordinary service on board, with her dining rooms and bars open as usual. The first return voyage brought back 1,500 passengers, among them the American ambassador and other embassy staff. After these long voyages, the Gripsholm continued serving the American government until 1946, when both the Gripsholm and the Drottningholm commenced their regular operations after having made a total of 33 exchange voyages. The New York Times wrote about the Gripsholm in December of 1943. "We all like her. She's a happy ship. No other has brought home so many rejoicing passengers." Today we remember the German internees who departed on the Gripsholm on February 15, 1944. I join you in hoping that the internees who were exchanged will be remembered and acknowledged by the US government. I also hope that the efforts by the survivors, relatives, organizers, and students at the reunion will spark further research and education to bring more light to the history of the internment camps and the exchange voyages.
Thank you.